welcome everyone. My name is Glenda Dawson. This is LD. We're from Glenda's Dragon's Den on the Conscious Awakening Network on Roku and many other platforms. You can find us there. You can find us on Apple TV, on Amazon Fire TV, and we're happy that you're here with us.
Just don't cross the streams. That'd be very bad.
At this very moment, we're just going to take a second to just close our eyes and acknowledge the winter solstice, the beautiful day that shows us that we are starting to receive the light again. And this is the time where we go inside again. We go inside our own hearts, our own minds, our own souls, and see the reality of us and really acknowledge anything that you may like to keep about yourself or what you need to change or want to change and to become that better person. Take a couple of deep breaths and just let that energy flow through your body.
And suddenly I'm Victor Victoria.
There you go. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us. Today, we have a great, phenomenal guest.
Oh, thank you. Oh, guest.
Not you. Mary Edwards. She's an architect. She's an author. She is also a host on Conscious Awakening also. So that's all I'm going to say. Mary, why don't you give us everyone your story? Tell us all about you, how you got here, and go ahead. Welcome.
I'm happy to. Well, thank you. First of all, it's wonderful to be here with you, Glenda and LD and everyone. What a treat on this 21st of December. It really is a special day today. So that's even more meaningful that we go in and we come out and we are here to share news stories and intentions, I guess, for the rest of the year and what's coming up.
Right.
So I will just start sort of from the beginning about my life, and you can butt in. Don't ask questions along the way. Please do not butt in, but just explain. Have me explain different parts of it if you'd like. But anyway,
well, butt in definitely describes what I do. So yeah.
Okay.
600-pound gorilla just put
saying that as a joke because we were talking a minute ago about your role, and I thought, okay, I'll just give him a little nod here.
More like a Kaiser. It's a Kaiser roll.
So we're gonna have a fun night tonight. That's for sure. Woo-hoo! So winter solstice. Here we go.
Yeah.
So I'm not probably the typical person who comes on this show or on many shows. I grew up outside Chicago, and I grew up on Lake Michigan in the backyard. And my father and I used to sit out on the stars on my patio and look out at the stars and daydream about what it was like up there. And that's really where all my love of stars and my work really started. I got inspired by my father and my grandfather, who were actually rocket scientists. They went to Choate, Princeton, Northwestern, were trained to do that. But as a little girl, I didn't know all that. It didn't matter because they were showing me the stars and what they knew about. And we spent a lot of time in nature. We had a big backyard and a big ravine that went down along the side of our house, where there were deer and squirrels and raccoons. And we always had pets and birds and boats and docks and water. We spent our whole life on the water. And I'm a Pisces, so that was really wonderful for me to be swimming all the warm summer months and et cetera. But I didn't realize, and my mother happened to be an artist, and my grandmother was also an artist, and my mom's dad was an architect. So I grew up with rockets. My dad had an aeronautical aerospace company that designed and manufactured heavy rocketry from space with the government, with NASA, and with the Navy and the military. from World War II to the middle 1990s when they sold the company. But our dinner table conversations were about the Russians. Growing up, when you're older like me, all we talked about was the Russians and the space race. So and I'm 70, so I spent my whole life hearing about the space race, really from 1951. Literally, it was a topic of conversation. So anyway, I grew up with, I guess I'd just say, with a love of nature, a love of Father Sky and water, and an appreciation of building. So I grew up with basically earth space and outer space, which was how I explain it a little bit to allow people to know what my early inspirations came from. My mom's dad had a design build company, and they also owned a lumber company in Chicago. Mom and dad grew up together. They met in 4th grade, and there were two families that had known each other forever from church and business and life and stuff. So they were married forever until they weren't anymore. They both passed since the last 7 years. But I grew up with a love of development, architecture, people, meeting people's needs. Basically, that's what we learned. I learned from them, and that's what I spent my life really doing in art and design and architecture and development. Trying to help people find their own sense of place in a space, whether it was big or small, or a space station, I worked a lot with vets and homelessness and AIDS. I live in San Francisco, so I've always donated a lot of my time to veterans and homeless. I worked out of the White House for 30 years with Nancy Baker doing National Alliance to End Homelessness, because I was always so freaked. My biggest fear is being cold and living outside on the street. So anyway, so I grew up with a family that was very involved in the community, worked a lot with hospitals. They started hospitals, they did developments. So I grew up really on job sites. I wanted to be a boy since I was about 5 years old, because I didn't want a Barbie, I wanted a toolkit. And I wanted hammers. And I grew up in sort of a fancy family, and 1 or 3 girls. We were allowed to have a hammer, or make messy or be dirty. I got to do that the rest of my life when I left. But I grew up with a lot of care. But what changed everything is as I turned to about 5, I went on a spacecraft with my father. And we went up and for a few hours in the middle of the night from North Shore, Chicago. And I remember having old Greys and a couple Arcturians and a few other beings up there with me. And I was really scared. It was really cold. But I learned over the years and the decades that they are my dear friends, and they've really groomed me and been my friends forever. But back then it was really terrifying. And because of my father and my grandfather's involvement in the military and the government and NASA, basically at a triple whammy, he was never allowed to talk to me about it, nor was my mother or anyone in our family for my whole life. And he passed a few years ago, and I've talked to him a few times and asked him why he never talked to me about it. And he said, well, we weren't allowed to. We were told to keep our trap shut, and that there would be consequences if we didn't. So that, all of that, no, and I'm very intuitive. I know I have a lot of clairs. I know things. I don't know how I know a lot of things. I got a BFA, and then I went to interior design school. Then I went to a couple years of architecture school. I never got my AIA, so I got hired by NASA later on, which was my dream. But anyway, my whole life was really filled with just wanting to really help people. And I knew that from an early age, but I also knew coming out of literally when I was born, I remember feeling very weird, very hypersensitive to light, to sound, to a lot of the noise in our household. We had maids, and there were people cooking. It was like, where's my kitchen? I just want to go in and make a hard-boiled egg or a piece of toast. It was just busy. So I spent my whole life, for all the years until I went away to high school, out in the backyard, drawing and painting and planting, and been down at the beach and and really trying to spend as much time as I could outside of nature, which is where I got my love of nature and of sports from my family too. We all did a lot of sports. It was always about, sailing in the water and being respectful of the water. And my grandfather hated the waste of wood so much. My grandfather, the architect, he actually was the one who standardized 2x4s. And he also started Architectural Woodworkers Institute that went all over the world teaching people about the basics of molding and trim. And my sisters and I were always, having our pictures taken with my grandfather. And, because he was talking about be careful with wood. Frank Lloyd Wright, was in Chicago. So we grew up with a love of his architecture. And, but my grandfather said we need to standardize this. We're wasting too much wood. So anyway, I grew up with lots of good basic rules of thumb about housing. And that's what I have loved doing basically my whole life. What I didn't know was how weird I was.
Well, point of information, since you have given me that little opening, in the midst of all this, you went up in a spacecraft.
Yes.
Okay. So we're talking about the 60s?
56. I was 5 years old. I was born in 1951. So I went up the first time in 56. Then I went up and the second time. Yes.
Okay. So
pre-Apollo.
I'm presuming that what you're describing is not part of the known NASA system of rocketry.
I don't remember going up. I don't remember going through the wall. I remember lying on the table with my dad there and the beings and then the lights and the cold and the needle and being freaked out. And then I remember being gone. So I really can't describe, other than the bright lights, really what the spaceship looked like. I didn't have a lot of, I'm just starting to come into this world. So I'm just going to say right off the bat, just for those of you who are listening, I'm really new at this. This is something that I've been sort of hiding out with for my whole life until the last really couple of years. In the last 6 months, I've been investigating past lives and different things from when I was 19 and 20. I'd had astrology charts done and everything, but I didn't have any regressions done till the last few years. But I did travel a lot with work and with my family. So wherever I was, I go to wherever astrologer I could, or, I've been doing research, but so I don't really know about, all I know is a lot of vague memories of things, but I definitely remember that at age 5. And I definitely remember going back at age 6. They evidently took about 1,000 eggs, and I remember both of those. And then I went back at age 10, and I remember that, and that was on a bigger craft. But I, again, don't remember going up through the roof. I just remember a bigger room, and I remember having a big thing put on my head, and they were putting stats in my brain. And then I went off on that. It felt like for a couple of weeks. I don't really know how long I was actually gone for. But that was, they never took any more. They were checking me out and everything, but they weren't taking any more eggs. I remember at 10, it was just like really nice to just be sitting in a chair and having people like look at me and ask, whatever they were doing. But
I just want to clarify that what you're describing is pre-space program, as those of us who are not indoctrinated into what we'll call the secret space program.
Thank you. Yes.
Would know it. So this is before Apollo. This is, I think, before Mercury, because I think Mercury preceded Apollo. Just on a straight timeline, if you were 5 when this happened, those happened afterwards. So
it did.
People that have just come to meet you on this show don't realize that you were effectively part of what's known as the secret space program.
Correct.
So I just want to clarify that for people that are going, wait a minute, Mercury was the 60s, at least Apollo. So, and I just find it interesting that there was all of this mainstream nonsense about putting a man on the moon when the secret space program basically was going intergalactic in the 50s.
Right.
fair to say?
Yes, exactly. And my dad actually worked on he was doing a lot, their company, his dad was the one, he was also a rocket scientist, and so was his grandfather. I don't know what they were doing before then, because NASA didn't start. They were doing more telecommunications before then, because the company, Cook Electric, started in 1896 or 1894, something like that, doing a lot of other stuff. But it was mostly telecommunications in the beginning. So he mentioned a few times, he never could talk about it my whole life because he was sworn to secrecy. And none of my cousins, all my cousins really have passed, and my sisters didn't get the sort of the space gene that I did. But still, I've been asking people for my whole life about everything. And I just gave up a long time ago because no one said they knew anything about it, that they really didn't know anything about it. But I do know that Dad was doing a lot of telecommunications. He worked on a lot of the Apollo optics. And I know that Werner von Braun worked with our company for several years. But I don't know a lot about that either, because he's just starting to tell me things a little bit now, because he said, he's up and he's right here. I did, but he's not sworn to secrecy anymore. But
so you're communicating through your clairs when you say he's telling you things right now.
I communicate with my clairs, and I've been communicating for the last 2 years with a friend of mine that because I don't have a lot of capacity to talk to him and to do other things. I feel things, I see things, I can sort of see through walls with space. I have some weird talents I haven't really figured out yet, how I can come up with 30 different solutions down to a penny of how much it is in 5 seconds. I'm just learning about all these. I've been working and working and working as a single parent my whole life, and now I'm diving into all of this. So I'll come back in a year and give you more information. But it's through the clairs. I hear things. I get told certain things. I can hear certain things from Arcturians and Pleiadians and different people, but I don't know how I know that. I can talk to them. Sometimes I'm still learning. I'm trying to unblock. I've had PSTD. I got tested a few years ago, and they said I was 89% dysregular. And they said, how are you even functioning? And I said, well, I haven't been a lot of my life. I was working, I was functioning, but I was so traumatized really by a lot of what was going on. And then I have a lot of ADHD and a lot of dyslexia. I flip words. I have processing issues. I had a lot of sort of mean, unfortunately, tutors that were trying to change the way I was. And I know from talking to my galactic family and hearing it from other people and from myself, that I know, and I felt them, and they visit me here. I hear them, I feel them, I get glimpses of it. I know they've been helping me. Well, really since the womb. I always knew I've been really protected, but I didn't really know who they were till later. And I know they've always been there, and I really had a rough many years, like some of us have had. And I know they really saved me and helped me and guided me and nurtured me along the way, because I just kept going. Mom and Dad Dad was gone almost all the time my whole childhood, because he was down at White Sands or in Florida, and he was working all the time in this big company. And he never mentioned anything. That's why I just dropped it when I was about. And on both their deathbeds, I said, okay, what was the deal with these little grays on the spaceship? Tell me now, And they just both went, didn't say we couldn't. They just said, you've had a big imagination your whole life. So I am a different person now the last few months since I've gotten some information. So I have a feeling, and I already feel more relaxed, more safe, more validated, because Dad said, yes, my father took me up when I was 5. Your grandfather, this is, generations and generations have been helping us. And I'd never heard any of this, like a lot of people do and don't. So it's just such a relief. I'm finally really more settled than I've ever been in my life over the last few months of having these conversations with him, saying that I got the wiring, that I had the clairs, I was the hard work, and I got the DNA to do what I did. And I wrote, and I just want to show you a picture. My grandfather built this dollhouse. That's me on the right there. He built this dollhouse. This is on the cover of the Chicago Tribune. And actually, this is like what my condo looks like. I've got a rooftop, not all the rooms. But, and my grandmother used to make all her clothes. So that's why my sister and I are the same. But I got to have, when we weren't traveling around talking about different lumber and wood with him and all over Chicago and all over really the country. We went, I tried to go whenever I could till I was later in my life. I mean, through teens and college and stuff. And that was me, that was in my bedroom. So I would sit there at night and go, hi, how are you doing? What do you want? I mean, that's what I'm doing right there. That dollhouse was my sanity. How old do you think I am there?
7.
7. That's what I've always thought, 6 or 7. So I think the design, and I know through lifetimes, I've done a lot of past life things. The thread throughout most of my lifetimes that I've researched is all about design and healing. So that's where I was creating home, because I didn't know where my home was, because I never fit in that family, even though it was great. And I know Dad was incredible and both my parents were great, but that's where I got, that's where I found home. E.T. phone home. And I really get it and validate it to myself all these years after just talking to him the last few months. Anyway, and so I grew up with a love of life. We got to travel all over the world. So we went to museums. We went to Africa and India and Tibet and Nepal and China and Africa. And I'm not saying that to brag that we went all over the world, but they wanted us. They always said, we're going to take whoever wants to go on a free trip with us. And I went on as many as I could to those places, and Japan and China. I mean, literally all over the place. Never went to Niagara Falls or normal places that I wanted to go, but we got to go to London when I was 10 and go to Stonehenge. And Dad's told me recently too, I said, was that part of my exposure and my training almost to really get me to be comfortable traveling all over the place and learning more about culture and other people, and not to be judgmental, because I've done a lot of work in China and all over. And when I finally got to work at NASA for several years, it was the first International Space Station. And when I got hired, she said, are you, these are your capabilities? And I said, well, yeah, I love it. And I said, I understand isolation and confinement. I feel like I've been in this my whole life. And she didn't really get it. And then we became friends and we worked together for several years when I was a contractor out of Moffett Field here near, in Silicon Valley. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so it's been an unfolding. I get little wake up calls all the way along my life. Most of my childhood I really don't remember a lot of it. I've been told I was part of my lab and some robotic and other programs, which I don't see, I don't feel it. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't really want to know.
A lot of that could be self-preservation. People don't realize how much programming and dogma society implants into us, particularly in this country, so that we are easily manipulated. And it sounds to me as if you are the example of what happens when you're free to let your mind roam and experience all these other sensitivities without having to dumb down and follow the rules.
Right.
Does that resonate?
Absolutely. You nailed it. That's unbelievable that you catch that. Most people don't get that. And Dad, when I talked to him a few weeks ago, I said, why? I wanted to go to Princeton. In 1969, they were taking women. And I said, I know I was one of 3 girls, but you and your brothers went there and you wouldn't let me go there. And he said, well, women didn't go there then. I said, that is so macho. I was like, that's so not fair. But he said, Mary, you found it on your own. And I said, you're right. Because I wanted to go to Boulder, to Colorado. My older sister had gone there. And I just loved that I wanted to go be at a college that was made out of nature. The flagstone, the rocks, I wanted nature as my as my foundation. So I was
Well, that ain't
working.
Princeton.
Huh?
That ain't Princeton.
No, and I wanted, and I got my BFA. It was perfect. And that's why it was perfect, because I could, I could go and I could work. I took 125 hours and I was working. I started teaching art to kids 6 to 12-year-olds when I was 19 years old. I was teaching art therapy. I was teaching suicidals. I mean, I was learning all these things I could have never done I already grew up waspy. I wanted to just go be free. And I got my first flannel shirt and my first pair of blue jeans. And I lived in a cabin up in Jamestown above Boulder. I bought a pickup truck and I got a dog and 2 cats. And I lived up all by myself for like the first couple of years, just going, wow, I'm free. Anyway, it was really, they allowed me to do that. And then I thought, well, art's great. I'll always do art, but I want to be able to control the whole environment like Dad did rockets and my grandfather did. So then I went to interior design school for 4 nights a week and got my degree in interior design at night while I was working at that cool firm that we worked on the Star Trek logo. We worked on Faneuil Hall and Madison Square Garden. We were doing a lot of work for Disney. And what was great for me, being a multi-sensory, sort of multi-D person, even back then, is I got to work doing graphics, interiors for the Casper Event Center, for Aspen and Vail, hotels, restaurants. We were doing everything. So it was perfect that I could really weave together all the things that I wanted to do to create a whole environment consistently. Good design, good graphics, good interiors, good materials. And then I was also taking a lot of sustainability classes. So I didn't like toxic. I mean, I've never liked, for 50 years, I've tried to find non-toxic paint and use real wood and not fake wood. So I've been doing, I went to architecture school for 2 years, got hired by NASA, and then I got my sustainability degree here at Presidio Graduate School. So I've woven together all the things that I could do. And then I studied under for 2 years in San Jose with a feng shui master. I had to hire a tutor to speak Chinese, and he was living here for a couple of years, working at Stanford, and he took me under his wing. So I've always been studying, learning as I could in the area that I wanted to. So I really did have a lot of freedom, and I just kept going, trying to build my self-esteem. I felt so stupid, dumb, imbalanced as a young child, and my teachers made fun of me. They'd say, well, your dad's a rocket scientist. Why can't you, how can you do math in your head and not do long division? And I said, well, I don't know. So I'd get A's and F's. It was like, I've always been so weird, and backwards and forwards. My son got a lot of that. My mom could draw forwards and backwards and upside down and backwards, and I could do little hieroglyphic things like my daughter could. So anyway, it was, a wiggly life, hard and wonderful and out there and fun and crazy. But I kept working. I stayed focused and kept really doing what I loved. So it was always design. It was always teaching on the side. And I ended up teaching at the Academy of Art College for 5 years, teaching color and textiles to architects, business principles and practices. And that's how I got to get hired at NASA out of Moffett Field for several years as a contractor, because I was teaching it at a university or a college. And they demanded that as a contractor. And then we went down. So
with all of this, tell me about the book.
Okay, so I snuck down to, I told my kids I was going to a real estate conference, to a starseed class in LA right before COVID started, like 4 years ago. And Dr. Christian, what's his name, that great guy. And I said, anyway, I went down there and we were doing all these tests. I was scared. I was sitting in the back row. There were about 10 or 15 of us in the class. And I went, oh my God, I could see all these. I can do some of these things. I feel some of these things. Anyway, I woke up and the Conscious Life Expo was at the LAX Hilton when I was staying there. So I'd signed up for that. So I was taking some classes. Then I was trying to find somebody, because I had so many dreams had come into reality, sort of, that I knew all these things were real. I knew I'd been learning. I knew it was time for me to dive into this. So I went to all the Conscious Life Expo. I went to, all those incredible speakers. And I heard Barbara Lamb and Leonard Moulton Howe and, Tracy Ash. And I was just like going, oh my God, why did I do this about 10 or 20 years ago? And so I started waking up back then just a little bit. And I thought, well, I had heard in my head for about 15 or 20 years, write the book. And I'd say, I don't have a book. I don't have anything to write about. I don't know anything. And they'd say, write the book. And I said, it's got to be about kids. That's why I taught kids 6 to 12-year-olds. And then I taught problem kids in Boulder. And then I've always done it here too on the side. I teach mental health professionals now once every couple of weeks for 3 hours on their team building things. I've just always loved teaching. And just to help other people, we want to help other people the way we can. And I have a lot of teachers in my family, and my sister taught here and blah, blah. But anyway, so I went down the line and I was listening to everybody, and I've been watching Gaia for a long time. So I already knew who Barbara and a lot of these people were. Randy Weidenheimer and different people. I lived in Boulder, and I'd met some of the Gaia people anyway, because I'd lived there for many years, a long time ago. But anyway, so I went up and I asked about 5 or 6 people if I could talk to them. And I said, I knew I felt I was pregnant a lot of my life because I have over 100 hybrid kids. I just keep learning more and more about it. But it was very strange also. Part of my frustration with my life and nobody talking to me is I didn't understand why I was pregnant when I had never done anything, like starting in high school and college. And then it was like, how can I keep being pregnant and then losing these children? I would miscarriage after miscarriage. I went to actually a hospital here when I first moved here, and I went in I knew I had had a miscarriage, and I went into the hospital, and I woke up on Sunday morning. I went in on Friday because I thought I was like bleeding to death. And I woke up Sunday morning and I went, oh my God, I don't remember any of the whole weekend. They had me so drugged, and they said, oh, we did 2 tubular pregnancies on you. And I woke up with a scar this big that I have along my stomach. And I woke up in a maternity room. I've never even really told anybody about this. I can't believe I'm even remembering this. Anyway, I woke up in the maternity room because they didn't know where to put me. And the woman sitting in the bed next to me had just had a baby. And I was ringing for the doctor, and I said, what am I doing in here? What the heck did you do to me? Get me out of here. What did you do? And they said, we couldn't find it. There was nothing there, so we cut you open. We did it twice, and I felt like I was I was really in pain. So this was Sunday morning, and I said, you got to get me out of here. This is a woman having a baby. We can't be talking about this. She's excited. I'm going to have a baby someday. This is not nice of you to do this. And I said, if you don't get me out of here, I have to go to work tomorrow, and I have a class that I have to teach at the Academy of College, and I have all these stitches in me. I said, if I walk around this floor 50 times, will you let me out? And they said, well, you're not going to. You're going to pass out. And I said, want to bet? Will you sign? And I made them, and I had one of those drippy things on me. I felt terrible. And guess who walked around the floor 50 times? And I made them let me out that day. And I went to work the next day, even though I felt terrible. I could barely walk. But anyway, so having that whole experience of few decades of that, actually, I ended up having my 2 Earth children late in my 30s. But I gave birth a lot of times. So anyway, back to conscious life. Sorry, got on a tangent there. So I talked to Linda, and I said, I want to know about, can we meet for a few minutes? And I have an idea. But I said, first of all, I want to learn about hybridization, because I think I've had I've had some things like, and this, then I asked in this class that I was taking, and they said, we don't really know anything about hybridization. I said, I know I have implants because I had a couple things removed from my body, blah, blah, blah. And so anyway, and then I got, anyway, all of these people over these couple of days. And then I went up to Barbara again, because she was really busy, of course. And I just said, you are incredible. I said, I think I know I have to do a regression with you, but I also would like to just talk to you for 5 minutes. Would you have time? So she had time later, and we talked, and I said, well, I'd like to come. Can we set up something? I'll come down, fly down to San Diego and do a couple of regressions with you for the weekend. But I also want to ask you a question. Before I said, I have had these memories. I said 5-10 years ago, I started doing a book called Mary's Space Odyssey. But I said, I want to do a book, and I know you have had this incredible experience. Would you ever be interested in it? And may I fly down, and then we could talk about it more when I visit with you. And I know you're really busy and you're really amazing. Anyway, so I flew down a couple months later, and we talked till midnight. And I'd already made these 2 books, but I hadn't. So I took them with me, coloring book on I'm a space explorer, because I always wanted to be a space explorer. That's me on the cover. My dog that I made pink for kids. So I worked with a friend on this that owns a preschool here in town, like 5 or 6 years ago. And I never published it, but it was just all, a story of, it was a coloring book for kids. I'm on a space mission, because I've always been on a mission my whole life. So I thought, what a cool way to start it. Anyway, and I went and taught at the preschool a few times, and talked about zero gravity, and I wanted to teach other kids about, so anyway, I did that. So I showed her that. And then I did this, I Am the Universe, that I haven't had time to publish either. That's me on the cover at 5. And it was a similar book, just talking about I was starting this one though at, there's me. And I said, let's talk about the universe and Big Bang and the stars and the solar system, like how my parents had taught me. And I wanted to teach other kids, to get them inspired about space and the importance. So anyway, so I took those down with Barbara, and she said, oh, how did you do that? And I said, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done a book, but I said, with your incredible background, if you'd be willing to take a chance on me, could we talk about it a little bit? And by the end of the weekend, I had a little rough, because I can put stuff together. And I said, would you like to do it? I said, I will bug you every day for however long it takes. We'll take an hour, and we can let's work together and pick out 18 or 20 of the regressions. But this has to be a positive book. It's got to be a positive, happy book. And I said, if you don't mind, I'd like to put me on the cover, and then the 2 beings that were on the craft with me, but I want to put clothes on one of them, because I didn't want anybody to think, oh, here are 2 beings with me holding their hands, because I know how weird people can get. So anyway, we came up, we had a blast for about 6 or 8 months working on this, and we went and picked the most positive teaching. And I said, all planets and all people are the same different. For all of us that have learning issues. And then and I said, when we became moms, we learned the value of reading together with our children and encouraged them to keep an open mind. We dedicate this book to all children and grandchildren, because Barbara has grandchildren, who are the pioneers of the future. We hope to inspire young minds to the magic of the universe and to other possibility of otherworldly surprises. It's up to future space explorers to discover and share new information about the universe. Please enjoy. So we really picked, and I said to Barbara, I said, I know people are going to make comments about the ET, so I'm going to keep it even more childlike than I normally would, because I don't know, I've seen some of these. But anyway, so we picked 18 positive stories of friendship and learning. And we had a blast. And then we published it, and it's a hard copy and soft copy and on Kindle on Amazon. So it was just one of the best things. And we still get, we've done a bunch of interviews, and, it's just been, we both talk about it a lot, how it's.
So this book is basically about real experiences.
This is real experiences.
So to help children not be afraid, to help them understand that they're not alone, that it happens quite often, more than, people like to talk about, and to give them a sense of feeling safe, and know that by not being alone, not being the only ones that it happens to, that they can now feel good about themselves.
Exactly, and have someone to talk to, because I said, I'm sorry, but if it's okay, this is a little bit about me, because, and she said, well, I haven't had those experiences. And I said, well, I don't have the experiences that you have, so we agreed that this could be really good. And on the back of it, I just wrote, the book is based on real accounts with extraterrestrial beings of various kinds, as reported by children and adults who have had these experiences. We hope that our stories will inspire you to believe in possibilities and friendships that will come in many shapes, colors, and styles. Both authors are experiencers themselves and are aware that many people who have been abducted, we only put that word in because I said we have to do something because we're going to get slammed by people who, because it was scary for me and it was scary for a lot of people.
Right.
I said, we really need to put this on there. And she said, are you sure? And I said, yeah, definitely. I said, you've talked about it forever, but I said, we want to make sure that we're not, saying that this is like a walk in the park, because it wasn't. But anyway, who have been abducted report negative encounters, yet many share more positive events. We are committed to supporting the well-being of humanity and Earth and fostering good relations with other beings in space. And why we put this in the introduction, we said, millions of people worldwide are recognizing that they have been visited by and taken away by otherworldly beings. These beings have gradually been identified as extraterrestrial beings who seem to be coming from other planets in unusual spacecrafts. So interest in the phenomena. So we wanted to tell a story. I said, let's just do one whole page.
Right.
And then hopefully reading this book to children will assist parents in helping their children who have encountered these beings and may possibly be helping themselves. We wish to open their awareness of other intelligent lives in the universe and of the benefits of knowing each other. Many of them are very interested in us humans, and we can learn to reciprocate with interest in them and learn a lot from them as well.
So the book focuses on 18 regressions.
Yes, about 18 regressions. I didn't want to make too long a one. Barbara had done a few other books.
Well, I mean, it's a children's book. You don't want to make it War and Peace.
Right.
Exactly.
So
that wasn't easy, though.
Some of them are actually yours. Is that fair to say?
No. These are all regressions. They're all regressions from Barbara's clients.
Oh, these are all Barbara's clients.
Right. All Barbara's clients that she has regressed, that have parents and kids and stuff talking, mostly the kids who have, so it's from her background in doing the regressions and talking to different children. Like this one says, on the spaceship, right?
Okay.
On a spaceship, my friends poke around and check my body. If there is something wrong inside, they heal me with light. Others watch me from a gallery above us. They're all different ways that kids learn positive experiences from the ETs, from learning how to drive a spacecraft to learning, getting taken up. And then this one says, I love being pulled up in a big beam of light. It feels like I'm flying. This happens at night and sometimes in the day too. So each one has a different story about healing light, learning, when they look into your eyes, and gives lots of information. Sometimes he sees to see and know absolutely everything about me.
Right.
So none of these are yours.
No, none of these are mine. I wanted her to use her validation from what she got from clients, and it was my idea to do it. And I said, well, let's just work together on this. So no, they're all hers.
No, I understand. But you had similar experiences?
Well, I feel like I've been helped forever, really. Well, one particular one that's sort of easy to address. Let's see, I wonder if I have a picture of it here. There are many actually, but why I did this piece of art, I called Bridge to the Stars. And this was Archangel Michael helped me. About 5 years ago, I was driving across the Golden Gate Bridge and 3 big black rocks like attacked my Audi. I used to have an Audi. It's gone now because it got wrecked. But these 3 huge black rocks came down, and one went through the windshield, one underneath my car, and one went on the side of the car. And I was about to get on the Golden Gate Bridge, and smoke was coming out of my car. I've never had a problem with my car in my whole life. But my foot pedal wasn't working, and I couldn't steer anymore, whatever the engine, about all that stuff. So anyway, I was about to go through the Golden Gate Bridge before they took away the ramp thing or the toll booth. And I thought, oh my God, and people were honking at me now, and I always go the speed limit, but I was like out of control. And I thought, I have to get to the other side. I can't. I just closed on a house that morning. I had signed paper in Sonoma. So I was driving back to the city, and I thought, if I get it done, I could explode right here on the Golden Gate Bridge. I have to get to the Presidio, where I used to work doing sustainable films and stuff for many years, and where my son works. I said, please, I thought I have to get to the other side of the bridge. You can't fall apart and explode on the bridge, because it was really getting scary. So I said, and I'd never really done this before. I said, Archangel Michael, or anybody who's here, would you please come and help me? I need help right now. I cannot die today, and I don't want to kill anybody else, and I might, because I'm losing control. Help, help. I'm calling for help. And 2 seconds later, my car slowed down. My steering wheel, it was like self-driving, and got me across the bridge to that parking lot that I had parked in a million times. And I jumped out of the car, and then the whole thing just went like this. And I had it towed away, and I went and bought a car the next day, a little Passat on sale. And I drove across the bridge and took a picture of the blue sky. This was all blue sky.
Right.
And then I put the Pleiades up there, because I knew I'd been helped and saved by whoever it was. I called Archangel Michael, but so many Pleiadians are always just. So anyway, I sort of manipulated the background, and I called that Bridge to the Stars. So that was one definitely healing. And then also getting out of the hospital that day after I'd had like 25 stitches. Right. And that was healed within like a couple of weeks. I could barely walk, and I was literally, and I was so busy, I don't even remember how long it was, but I think within a couple of weeks, all my stitches were gone. It was all fine. I mean, how I walked out that day, it was sort of, I said, I will sue if you don't let me get out of here today, because you did not have my authorization. They said, you signed it. I said, I don't remember signing it. I was so drugged. You guys had me so drugged, and I don't sue. But anyway, and then one time I was helped when I was drowning. And when I was 18 in Mexico, one time I was saving a little kid who I'd met on a bus, and she was drowning, and I knew I was drowning, and I said, can somebody help me? And they dragged me out, and I was fine. I didn't have a near-death experience. I didn't see anything, but so I know I've definitely been supported.
Right.
Forever.
Before we continue, hybrid children. I want you to touch a little bit on that, or as much as you want, or no, we are coming close to the end of the show, but I know a lot of people heard that, and they're going to be, wait, what is that? And maybe we should explain it.
Well, it's a little tricky it's hard I knew that I had many children, and I'm still not an expert on it. I don't know. We know a lot of other people. You can probably explain it better than I can, but I know there are different ways hybridization works. I know that I had eggs taken from me, and they used my eggs into sort of a bouillabaisse, or a cocktail, people call it, of material from different beings, from other planets. And And I've learned about, I've only spoken through somebody to a few of my children that are 3 of them, Palladian children that live in the Pleiades, through Shirley Bolstock, who used to live in Denver, who passed, that I did a book with her called Booby Heaven. She passed a couple of years ago, and she called me and said, I've got stage 4 cancer. You're the only one that I would trust to do the book. Will you help me design a book, because I'm not going to be here in a few months? And I said, well, what do you want to talk about it? And she said, I want to do a funny book on where boobies go when they go to heaven. Are you kidding? And here she is about, Shirley, you are just awesome. So anyway, I said, so we called it a go-to book for boobies who ascend to booby heaven, bounce back up with fun adventures. So one day I was having a reading with her, because we were just friends, and I was doing a reading with her. So anyway, we became friends. And then she found out, she knew I'd worked on cancer hospitals. So she said, will you do this book with me? And so when we were talking about the book, and she passed about 4 months after, I said, how much time do we have to make the book? But she was just unbelievable. So we were really connected somehow. And one day when we were talking about the book, she said, oh, I have your hybrid kids on the phone. They want to meet you. And I said, well, what are they doing there? How did they find us? Anyway, they did. And so we had several conversations with them and did some designs with them. And they said, I met the father, Charles. They named their, so anyway, they're 3 hybrid children. Well, 4 of them actually, 2 from one family that are 6 and 12. And then cousins got some of my eggs. And the father is up there. And he said, Mary, thank you so much. We love your space DNA. We love your DNA. We are so honored that we got your eggs. And I said, oh my gosh. And I said, oh, the cousins have some too. I said, what's the deal? And they said, well, up here, we just, we give eggs, we share eggs more freely than you do on Earth. Right. And I said, well, that's incredible. So we got talking about it, and they just, so anyway, those are the only ones that I've talked to. So I know that I have, my 20s, I was pretty busy. So I know I've been told there are, I have about 25 that are living on a craft, and that that are a little bit too hybridy looking, that couldn't come back and live on Earth because they looked a little bit too different. I was really having some memories when right. So 25 of them out of about the 120 or something that a bunch of us, different people have found and they've told me about. I have about 8 in China that are all in their 20s. And a friend of mine who's really good with locating where they are. I try to talk to many different people over the last few years to see if they could find their names and their locations. And this one person I've talked to a lot, found them. They're all smart, creative. We know that part of, I'm 82% them, and their father's that, and they're Palladians and Arcturians. And so we did some breakdowns on that, whether people want to believe that or not. You don't have to believe me. I've talked to a couple different people. I've gone over it, and my dad has verified it. A couple of the people that I know that have passed that I've been talking to have verified that. So there are different ways that you can be hybridized, and right. We know about and so what was happening to me was I would get to, several months, and then the baby would be taken either on a craft or in some other capacity and taken up with someone else, or be, hybridized in different ways. I don't really have a good way to explain it yet.
Well, you were a surrogate,
I was a surrogate.
Yeah, and then the gestations were completed remotely
In a few different ways. And of course, Geraldine Roscoe, our friend, I've talked to her many times about it, because she's really been an expert on it. I hope over the next few years I'm going to really dive in, and that's one thing that I would like to help other people understand, that I'm really not, they have the ability right now or the language to talk about it carefully or responsibly. And Barbara and I have talked about it, of course, a lot. And she's brilliant at it. I've interviewed her a few times for Can. It's sort of explaining it because she has had many people who understand the whole process and have been through that. And I really don't understand it all. And I don't know if I ever will. I know, sometimes they want to meet you, sometimes they don't. I was thrilled that these younger ones up in the Pleiades wanted to chat. And that was really fun. We designed some overalls. They said, "Oh, we want blue jean overalls." And I said, "Don't you want like a little zoot suit?" And they said, well, the son wanted that, but the girl wanted, "Oh, I love blue jeans." So I'd be sketching. And I said, "Do you want me to hold it up?" And they said, "No, we can see you." I was like, "Oh yeah, duh." So I said, "What kind of patterns?" And I have about 20 books in the other room because I've always designed a lot of textiles. I had my rugs and textiles and showrooms for about 10 years. I had rugs made in India and Hong Kong and the Philippines and put them through 70 showrooms. And I did kids collection too for many, many years. And then it got too complicated and everybody was stealing my designs. But they said, "Oh yeah." So I would just bring these books out, and Elizabeth, who named herself after me, her father named my middle name. They said, "Oh, we're going to start calling her Elizabeth now." We went through all of these designs, and it was a blast. So that's all I've met, or a couple of really, her and her son, Alexander, who they named.
Mary, we've got a couple of minutes left.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
No,
No,
not to be sorry. Better than having a half hour left and being done. How do people get a hold of the books, reach out to you? How do you want people to interface with you if they have children that are, relating these experiences and they feel the books will help them?
Right.
Well, I'd love to give you my email because I've spent a lot of time now on calls.
Right.
Barbara and I,
No,
she
go
does.
ahead.
You don't need to qualify how
I'm
do
just
you
saying.
want?
No, I'm just
Yeah.
saying. I just tell people to email me at meedwards11@gmail.com. meedwards11@gmail.com. There are many Mary Edwardses, so it's like Mary Elizabeth Edwards, meedwards11@gmail.com, and you can look up at my website, which is is maryedwardsdesign.com. And I just, on my website, I just am starting to talk about all this now. And I've got Can on there, and I put a couple interviews up today. And,
Nice.
I'm coming out of the closet right now with all this. I finally moved over to, but I'd love to help anybody. And we've gotten, hundreds of calls and emails from people, and the parents go, "Oh, I've seen one of those." And these 3-year-old, 4-year-olds go, "Oh," so people, it is helping start the dialogue, and that's all we want kids to do. So,
and that's the takeaway for us. So we wanted to be able to provide a way.
Oh, thank you.
For people to reach out and get the resource. Is that correct for the .com?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you. And they can go on Amazon. All they have to do is punch in Kids Adventures with ET Friends in Space. And it's Lamb and Edwards.
Right.
So we really did it together. So, and it's in hard copy and soft copy and on Kindle too. I think they're $15 soft cover like this. Then we have hard cover, they're a little bit like $20.
And that is a beautiful thing because now kids can talk about this. It helps them to open up.
And we want to thank you for giving us so much of your experience. It's certainly not what the majority of people are used to, but that's why we're here is to help the people that are trying to make sense of the experiencing. Understanding is overrated. Once you've experienced it, you've experienced it. Honey, who do we have next?
Yes, Mary, thank you. And now I want to say next week, we have Sarah Garcia. She has been known as the Mexican Elvira. And we hope to see you next week on Wednesday, 9 p.m.
And maybe
Eastern.
we can have a bite with her.
Thank Thank you, Mary.
I had to get one in, Mary. I'm sorry.
Appreciate you. Love you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I've
you.
loved being with you. Thank you for the opportunity.